Hey there, welcome to our last lesson in this unit, which is looking at human impact. We've got another name for human impact, and it's on our first slide. We call that anthropogenic factors. How have people changed Earth's environment? Now, and something that has to be mentioned when we get into this topic is we're not trying to be political here. I'm just going to give you terms, definitions, facts, and some other things for you to make your own decisions from. So whether you view human activity as good or bad or neither, it just happens, here's some things to keep in mind for how the environment changes when people move into an area. We didn't really think about ecology as a science much until we started to realize, wow, there's a lot of people. Just since 1960, the world population has almost quadrupled. So think back to your grandparents' generation. There used to be a little over 2 billion people. Now there's 8 billion people. There's 4 times more people living on Earth than just a few generations ago. And we're taking up a lot of room. So, how does the environment change once you have more people living in more places and needing more things? One of the first things that comes to mind is habitat destruction versus this balance with conservation. Conservation is when we try to keep things the same. If you've ever had the opportunity to go to an ocean side beach, so you've gone to the beach on an ocean, you may have seen these signs that say, don't walk on the dunes. Stay on the crosswalk. Don't walk up on the dune area. Those are sensitive areas. Different species, like those grasses that help hold the dunes in place, help control erosion. So it's a way of preserving that nice beach area if we keep those grasses in place. Also, those dunes are habitats for, in some cases, endangered species. Sea turtles come up onto those beaches, lay their eggs in the dunes, and then go back to the ocean. If we're trying to conserve an area instead of letting habitat destruction happen, this is one place where you might see that. And you can find many other areas like this. On that note, if you can balance conservation with human population growth, we have this idea of sustainable development. Have we done development in an area without depleting the natural resources? Have we left a balance of green space? Have we let natural waterways uh, remain undisturbed so that there can continue to be species that migrate through those waterways and just have that availability of green space that's, even good for people to experience, but it's also good for wildlife and biodiversity. People need resources for the things they eat, the things they make, the things that, keep our lives happening the way that we expect. And one balance that has to be struck is with over harvesting. Are we fishing? Are we logging? Are we farming too much or at rates that are faster than the recovery rate of an area? If I keep cutting down trees and not replanting any or helping that environment do it in a way that it replenishes, that's an idea of unsustainable development. So overharvesting is when we pull out more than the environment can put back in. This has happened with some species of whales almost, where we hunted whales for many years as a source of oil, and the whale populations just about went extinct because of overharvesting. It's now international law that you can't hunt whales, and they have come back in large numbers. Similarly, for other species of fish that we just pull in for, they're species of fish that get eaten and sold. Uh, there has been instances of overharvesting there. As human development happens, and again, we've got examples from the logging industry here, habitat fragmentation can happen. Anytime we split a natural area and the species that tend to migrate, from one side to the other, they're trying to find mates, they're trying to find habitat places to live, they're trying to find breeding grounds. As human development splits those areas, we have habitat fragmentation. So some ways to mitigate that, you see this interesting little bridge in the picture. That's actually a wildlife bridge. That highway has more or less split a region of rural, I think that's Montana, and that bridge is put in place. And any large animals and small animals can get across that bridge. They don't have to cross the road. Pollution. Chances are you're familiar with this. You've heard about this in science classes forever. But a way to think about this is it's not just substances that are in the environment, it's also energy. You could have things like light pollution, noise pollution, any type of energy or substance that goes into that environment and that is destructive or goes in at a rate where it's not broken down, diluted, or stored. This is a picture here of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. This is a region of the Atlantic Ocean, or sorry, not Atlantic, Pacific Ocean, where there's a patch of floating garbage the size of Texas. This thing's huge. There's efforts to clean that, but just realize that pollution is something that we deal with. And if we think that it's important to keep polluting substances and energy out of the environment, there's ways that that can be done. Again, not trying to get political here, but just in general, your definition for climate change is when there's long-term shifts in temperatures and weather patterns. If you've been alive as long as I have, you may have noticed that there's been a connotation change. You don't really hear about global warming anymore. You've got this new term, climate change. So this is trying to be inclusive of the idea that there's large swings in weather patterns. We have had more destructive large storms in the past, say, 20 years than in the 20 years prior. Right now, it's September 25th or so, 25th, 26th when I'm recording this, and Hurricane Helen is headed our way, and we're experiencing the effects of those devastating storms from time to time, partly, allegedly, driven by climate change. Back more to living things here. When we're looking at an area and we're trying to preserve and conserve it, one thing we're trying to preserve is biodiversity. It's not just whether or not we have a bunch of trees growing in an area, a bunch of flowers growing in an area, a bunch of squirrels living in an area. We're trying to look at the fact that we have the trees and the flowers and the squirrels and multiple species of each of those. Because when you have multiple species, when you've got many members of that population, you've got a lot of genetic diversity. Lots of different genes and traits, a very resilient ecosystem that can adapt to changes. When we have species diversity, literally lots of different species. There's interdependence there. You have complex food webs. It's not just the rabbits eat the grass and the snakes eat the rabbits and the hawks eat the snakes. It's the fact that the hawks can eat the rabbits as well. It's the fact that the rabbits have places to go and burrow and hide because there's trees and there's root systems that they can get under. There's a lot of interdependence there. The more species you have in an area, typically, the healthier that ecosystem is. And if we have multiple ecosystems near each other, there's exchanges and there's transition between them. The more diversity we have in an area as far as biological life and that environment, the more resilient those ecosystems will be. So biodiversity is that variety of life in an area. When we notice that biodiversity has gone down, sometimes what has happened is we go into a period of ecological restoration. We realize, whoops, we kind of needed those wetlands on the coast of Florida because lots of fish that live out in the ocean actually come and lay their eggs and spawn in the wetlands. And if our if our fishing waters are starting to be depleted, it seems like they're being overfished. They may not be overfished. They may just be, those fish are almost dying off because we didn't realize where they actually go and spawn their eggs and we recover those populations. So restoration is an effort to go in and help disturbed ecosystems recover. We started to realize that wetlands are super important for keeping a lot of other populations healthy and diverse. Our wetlands, especially the marine wetlands, so the ones that are really close to the ocean, but they're brackish water, they're a mix of fresh and salt water, those support 75% of the ocean's fish populations. Just those little wetlands, those kind of swampy areas like near on the edges of Florida, very, very important for the ecology of the region. If we value life and that diversity of life, this is ultimately what we're trying to prevent. We're trying to prevent extinction. Fun, but maybe not fun fact, 99% of all species that have ever lived on Earth aren't here anymore. They're extinct. Now, some of them They just can't survive the environment anymore. There's been change that happened long before humans ever came along. But here on this screen is an example of a bunch of species that are gone because, well, people messed up, if we can put it that way. We hunted the dodos to extinction. We hunted the Tasmanian wolf to extinction and the passenger pigeon. All species here that we didn't really realize what we were doing, or maybe we did and we didn't care. But these are creatures that are no longer around. And not just animals and birds, but plenty of plants and insect species as well. We'll end on a high note here. Elephants have been endangered for many years. Their tusks have been valued for the ivory, that material in those large tusks. It is illegal to sell ivory. There is absolutely no legal ivory in the world now at this point. And actually, efforts to help those large animals have a safe place to live and breed and grow are underway. These are pictures here of Addo Elephant National Park. Ecotourism. You can pay to go to this place. You can see all these elephants in this large conservation area. This is also an example of some captive breeding. We've got plenty of male and female members of this species. We've got vets and healthcare here and people to protect them from poaching. We're trying to get this population growing and healthy and reestablish this elephant population. There's your overview of ecology. That's our last lesson in this unit.